Hi everyone and welcome back to Modern Jubilees. Today we're going to look at the Ukraine-Russia conflict as it relates to the ancient Book of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees is part of the Apocrypha. It's part of the Ethiopian Bibles. The Christian and Jewish Ethiopians have always held Jubilees to be part of their Bibles. It was originally written in Hebrew, and it purports to come from an angel who was with Moses on Mount Sinai. This ancient text was used in the time of the Second Temple. The Essenes studied it and copied it by hand. Josephus was familiar with it. It is cited in the Jewish world as being the most ancient source for many of the books of Midrash. That is the ancient smaller texts, but the Book of Jubilees is unique for many reasons, but we're not going into that here. One of the most important parts in the Book of Jubilees and the most significant today is chapters 8 and 9. Noah, after surviving the flood, lands on Mount Ararat, which is in modern-day Armenia, where it meets Turkey. Then they begin their lives there, and they build cities in the names of their wives. But eventually, Noah's children and grandchildren begin to quarrel with each other, and so he decides there needs to be a division made. And so we get this division into the lands where the green here is the lands of Japheth, the purple here is the lands of Shem, the red here is the lands of Ham or Cham, but this is a little bit of a rough copy, of course. However, I want to zoom in on this area here where a lot of the conflict is going on actually between Russia and Ukraine. And we're going to look at it in the context of this book. We are going to really focus on verse 12 of chapter 8, which says, according to the writing, Shem's lot was the middle of the earth for him to take as an inheritance for himself, for his sons, and for the generations for eternity. So they chose lots. First, they divided among themselves secretly, then they told Noah, then Noah made a lottery, essentially, and the plot of the middle of the earth came out for Shem, and Noah was very happy because this contained Mount Zion and Mount Sinai, as well as the Garden of Eden, which is in the area of Ethiopia, according to the text of Jubilees. All right. Well, let's read this text together. According to the writing, Shem's lot was the middle of the earth for him to take as an inheritance for himself, for his sons, and for the generations for eternity. I highlighted the most important parts in order to figure out exactly where this boundary is, because the idea is that this line is separating between what we know of as Asia and what we know of as Europe. And of course, both Europe and Northern Asia, the area of Russia, belong to Japheth, and there's a boundary with Shem, but there is also this boundary we hear about that divides classically throughout time for thousands of years between Europe and Asia. So we're going to look at this in maps. From the middle of the Rhiphean mountain range, from the mouth of the water of the Tina river, his lot goes west through the middle of this river until it approaches the abyss of the waters this river comes from. This river empties and pours into the Me'at Sea and goes into the Great Sea. Everything north of this is Japheth, all that is south of it is Shem's. All right, now first the easy parts. What we see here as the Me'at Sea is what was known as the Meiotis in the Greek and Latin. In Greek and Latin, we have something called the Meiotis, and the Meiotis is another name for the Sea of Azov. The Sea of Azov is the smaller sea that sits on top of the Black Sea, that is above Turkey. Me'at in Hebrew means a small amount, and this smaller sea sits above the Black Sea, and it's known today as the Sea of Azov. Interestingly, Azov means in Hebrew, leave me alone, essentially, which implies that there's some sort of boundary with this place, and it is indeed a boundary. So that's what we know so far, and then we're going to go look at from the middle of the Rhiphean mountain range. Now, from the research I did into my book, I made a modern English translation of the Book of Jubilees with a running commentary, which is where I'm able to now reference in order to understand this text. And the Rhiphean mountain range is most associated with the Rhiphean Mountains. The Rhiphean Mountains are today's Ural Mountains, what was known as the Rhiphean Mountains. This large mountain range running vertical through Russia has classically divided between Europe and Asia. But we're going to see here exactly how that boundary is meant to work and worked in ancient times. The boundaries we see today are not random. They came about through millennia of history that began somewhere. And these boundaries begin with chapter 8 of Jubilees. This is our most ancient recording of an entire global system of boundaries. Chapter 9 then goes and subdivides these plots among the children of Noah's children. All right, so the Rhiphean Mountains are the Rhiphean Mountains. This is the Ural Mountains, the large mountain range running vertical through Russia, classically dividing between Europe and Asia. Next, from the mouth of the water of the Tina River. The Tina River is the Tanais in Greek. The Tanais is also known today as the Don River. Don is the fifth longest river in Europe and flows through Russia. In antiquity, it was the border between Europe and Asia by the Greek geographers. Here it divides between Japheth and Shem's lots. So now we're seeing two boundaries that were the classic divisions between Europe and Asia, and that is both the Rhiphean Mountains and the Tanais or Don River. And we're going to understand exactly how they're meant to connect through this text. All right, this is the first map we're going to look at, and this is all about the Ural Mountains. The Ural Mountains run like this through Russia. We have here the area that ends up being part of Kazakhstan. And so we already have a border that goes from the Caspian Sea up to and here we have something called Ural, from the Caspian Sea to the Ural Mountain area, and that is the boundary. Now here we see the Ural Mountains go all the way up, but we're specifically told in the quote from the middle of the Rafa or the Rhiphean or the Ural Mountains. These are the southern Urals, these are the central Urals, and these are the northern Urals. And so the middle is somewhere around here, the boundary hits around here, and so we start to zoom in on what we're talking about. So only from analyzing this text are we going to understand what to do. Here's another image. These are the Ural Mountains. This is the approximate middle of the Ural Mountains, which is where the boundary hits with Kazakhstan. This is the Don River coming out of the top of the Black Sea. We have the Mayotis here, or the Sea of Azov. This is the line of the Don River. And somehow this needs to connect with the Ural Mountains. We're going to look inside to understand exactly how we do that. Something like this is an important boundary, and then the Ural forms part of it. But let's look over here on the right side. This is a map of assessed control of terrain in the Russian-Ukraine war as of April 23rd, 2025, and it's just for reference. And here the green areas are Ukrainian advances to regain territory, and the red is territory being taken over by the Russians. Here is where Istanbul is, at the bottom of the Black Sea, and that is the capital of Turkey. We have Kazakhstan here, but Russia going all the way down here and taking over all these areas. And so Russia has already been encroaching down into Shem's lot for some time. Kazakhstan is sort of a boundary area between the Shemites and the Japhethites. We're going to figure out exactly how this line works, but it is naturally something around here. So this is the Sea of Azov sitting atop the Black Sea, and this is the Rostov-on-Don, the Don River right here, and it flows up and it makes this shape like this. All right, let's take a closer look at the Tanais River in general. The Tanais River moves from the Sea of Azov in this kind of shape, going up to just below Moscow. Moscow is here. This one is important because it shows that there's actually another river that the Don, which is flowing down from the lakes down into the sea, it flows into this river here. And so when we see the term mouth of the river, a mouth is where it's flowing, a river is flowing into either another river or a sea. But from the context we see, there's a difference between the mouth and reaching the sea. So when we talk about the mouth, we must be talking about this turning point here in the river. Turning point here, turning point here. But again, for reference, the Russian and Ukrainian forces, and the Ukrainian border, by the way, is already back here, and it doesn't go to the river. Whereas this division between the lots really is meant to go to the river. And so we're seeing that there is a tremendous encroaching from Russia. Let's check this map out. All right, here we have a map of Russian encroachment and expanse. Russia begins by being up north, which makes sense because it's actually around this border area. It's okay for it to have settled in this border area, but it's clearly part of the plot of Japheth. All right, so it's important to also look at a verse in chapter 9. Chapter 9 is the subdivisions into the children, so let's look at that for a second as well. Japheth also divided the land of his inheritance among his sons. The first lot for Gomer to the east from the north side to the river. So that might mean the north side of the river. The north side of the river is around where Moscow is. This is talking about the Don River. To the east from the north side of the river would mean everything east of the top of the Don River. Let's look at Magog. For Magog in the north, all the inner portions of the north until the Sea of Me'at. All right, so we looked at the Ural Mountain range. We said the Ural Mountains here, the Don River is here. We looked at the Tanais River. The Tanais River looks like this. This is the river we're talking about, also known as the Don. This is the mouth of that river. But the fighting is going on over here. And so in a way, you might say, what does it matter? But this is a boundary. This is an ancient boundary. So the fact that anybody would be going from all the way up in Moscow and taking over all the way down to the Sea of Azov it's an oxymoron. It makes no sense. These are different plots. Who they belong to is a question, but the fact that these are important boundaries is interesting. Ukraine's boundary already goes like this and not to the river. Moscow is clearly an important center here. See, it says Moscow, and that's wonderful and everything, but these are boundaries that are supposed to be respected. One side should belong to one person, and one side should belong to another person. This much is clear. Let's look at another map. All right, let's look here again for a moment. So from the middle of the Rhiphean mountain range, we said that's around here. From the mouth of the water of the Tina River, which is around here. This is the mouth right here, where it's meeting with another river. Okay, so this is the mouth. This is the middle, right around the boundary of Kazakhstan. This is around the middle. His lot goes west through the middle of this river. So again, from the middle of the Rhiphean mountain range, from the mouth of the water of the Tina River, it's giving us 2 points to look at. So I look at this point and I look at this point. 1 point, 2 point. His lot goes west through the middle of this river until it approaches the abyss of the water this river comes from. The river comes from springs, but it comes from the source is in the north and it's flowing down into the sea. And so this would be approximately the boundary. This would be the abyss of the waters this river comes from. This river empties and pours into the Ma'at Sea and goes into the Great Sea. Here, the Great Sea is the Black Sea. Elsewhere, the Great Sea is generally understood to be the Mediterranean Sea, but here we're dealing with translations of translations, and it's clear when it says the Ma'at Sea, the smaller sea above the larger sea, it's talking about the Sea of Azov above the Black Sea. So once more, from the middle of the Rhiphean mountain range, from the mouth of the water of the Tina River, his lot goes west through the middle of this river until it approaches the abyss of the waters this comes from. And so I think that the best way to read this is through the orange line. And this is the line that goes anyway by Kazakhstan, and then it goes east. From the middle of the Rhiphean mountain range, that's here where this red line is. From the mouth of the water of the Tina River, that's here where this line is. His lot goes west through the middle of this river until it approaches the abyss of the waters this river comes from, which is up here, the source of the water, which is south of Moscow. This river empties and pours into the Ma'at Sea and goes into the Great Sea. Everything north of this is Japheth's. All that is south of it is Shem's. This is very interesting and very important because here again we see the encroachment of Russia. Russia began up north in this area. Now let's look again at the chapter 9 part. The first lot for Gomer to the east from the north side of this river. For Magog in the north, all the inner portions of the north until the Sea of Ma'at. So what it's saying is that Gomer's lot was starting at this top area here and going east from the north side of the river. It probably means of the river and not to the river. The north side to the river meaning the north side of the river. So from the north of the river going east belonged to Gomer. So this top area belonged to Gomer. For Magog in the north, all the inner portions, meaning closer to this boundary, for the north until the Sea of Ma'at. So we know that the boundary actually does go to the Sea of Ma'at, and so we can actually continue it with this river here, which means go back to chapter 8 and try to reread it. From the middle of the Rhiphean mountain range, from the mouth of the water of the Tina River, his lot goes west through the middle of this river until it approaches the abyss of the waters this river comes from, and so it goes to this boundary here. This river empties and pours into the Ma'at Sea and goes into the Great Sea. That's helping us identify the sea. And so what we understand through studying also chapter 9 is that the boundary must go to the Sea of Ma'at, and so we get this pink border. And this actually does make sense with all of them. So let's read it again, because we are learning this in real time, because no one else is doing this. And I really wanted to figure this out. It's a puzzle. I'm not intimately related with either Ukraine or Russia. I have zero dog in this fight, but it is frustrating to see this conflict go on. A lot of people are being killed there, and yet everyone is just looking at completely different things, and people are about to give up hope on what to do here. So let's read this again, chapter 8. From the middle of the Rhiphean mountain range, that's this red line, from the mouth of the water of the Tina River. Okay, that's another point. It's saying mark this point, Mark this point. His lot goes west through the middle of this river, which means, and we've seen this in other areas in the south. We saw this when we were talking about the Gihon River, the Nile River, and it was saying it goes west to the westernmost boundary of that river. And so that's what's going on here. It's saying to the westernmost boundary of this river, which is this orange line here. His lot goes west through the middle of this river until it approaches the abyss of the waters this comes from, which is this line here. This river empties and pours into the Mount Sinai and goes into the Great Sea, is helping us identify the river to make sure we have the right river. And so we end up with this pink line because we are going all the way to the Mount Sinai. Let's read again from chapter 9 last time. The first lot for Gomer to the east from the north side to the river, meaning from north of the river, it's going east, and that is for Gomer. For Magog in the north, all the inner portions of the north, meaning touching Shem's lot. So here we have an additional line being made. Above this is for Gomer, and below this is for Magog in the north, all the inner portions of the north until the Sea of Me'at. And so we know that it actually reaches here. So it starts here, and this is the boundary for Magog. Now note that there is a division here between the land masses. And so when it says everything north of this belongs to Japheth, it's including all this place here, and it's including Crimea, belonging, of course, to Japheth, whereas everything east of Crimea and south of this boundary belongs to Shem. And so Russia is a different animal. It's a different thing. And so it shouldn't be ruling any of this area down here. It really has encroached. Look, this is the boundary. In 1547, it was this small thing. And by 1725, it was all this land. It's going way south of the borders. So maybe there are Shemites living here, but under Russian control. And maybe the boundary can go south a little bit. But we're not talking about these conflicts. We're talking about this area here. And this really is exactly where these boundaries are being drawn. And these are ancient boundaries and ancient pacts. And when someone comes across the border and starts massacring people because they want to just expand their land, expand and expand and expand. Look at this enormous land. They have so much land, Russia. So much. Everyone's so busy talking about this tiny little speck of land called the Holy Land promised in the Bible to the Israelites. But we're not looking at this enormous situation going on today, right now. All right, so there we have it, this new line, and the line goes from the tip of the Sea of Azov. It goes through the mouth of the river, and because it's in the Sea of Azov, it's going west to the westernmost part of the river, the boundary with which the source of the river comes from. It's flowing up to the center of the Ural Mountains, and this is the boundary. And this is, by the way, the boundary of Kazakhstan here. So it goes around the area of Kazakhstan. This is an important boundary. No country should be coming all the way from up north and encroaching all the way down south. These are completely different plots within the sons of Japheth, and it's encroaching into Shem's plot. This is problematic because this oath was made between the sons of Noah and in the presence of what's known as the Holy Judge, an angel. And they swore this oath and swore that whoever breaks this oath will be cursed. Pacts can be made, but at a certain point, this is going crazy. And when all this war is going on, these aren't pacts. These aren't agreements. This is a war, and this is someone breaking the oaths that were made between the children of Noah and Noah. And this is too much. This is going beyond the area of the two sons of Japheth that we talked about. It's going all the way into Shem's plot. And so it's just far too much. It's far too much, and it needs to go back within a certain boundary that makes sense and stay there, because no country gets to just keep expanding like this. And encroaching on Shem's lot is really the final straw, and this war with Ukraine is final straw, and this is just too much. So these are the boundaries, and we understand that these boundaries should be respected. This idea that the people ruling up in Moscow should also be ruling in the south, these are two different plots. And so hopefully this helps as just a intro to this topic. Russia and Ukraine, when it comes to the Book of Jubilees, these are the boundaries that are meant to be respected. This orange line here is meant to be respected going up to Kazakhstan's area. North of the river belongs to one son, south of the top of the river belongs to another son that is supposed to be bordering with the lot that belongs to Shem's children. And you might find this to be irrelevant and archaic, and I would disagree strongly. I think that this is important. I think that everyone should be able to respect boundaries, and expanding indefinitely is very problematic. It's very problematic. It's not supposed to be that one group rules the entire plot of Japheth, especially if they're doing this by way of a war. Well, I hope you all learned something here today. This is step one. I look forward to all of your comments and feedback. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This is Modern Jubilees, and we will see you next time.